Brock Purdy, I know it's extremely early, but let's say Purdy plays well here, Jeff, the rest of this season, going into the playoffs and maybe even during the playoffs. Does he have a legitimate shot at winning QB1 heading into 2023, or do you think the Niners are more apt to kind of open things up and compete for that spot? Is Jeff there? Hold on.
Yeah, you got me?
We got you. There he is.
All right. You've had my head spinning since last week when you kind of floated the idea of Purdy keeping the job even if Garoppolo comes back in the middle of the playoffs healthy. So, I mean, I think that's wild enough to already consider. But I think if you look down the road into next offseason, if Purdy continues to play pretty well, it probably makes Garoppolo a whole lot more expendable. You kind of erase the idea once again for like the 78th time with Garoppolo returning for another season. But it's really interesting because, I mean, you owe it to yourself to at least open up the competition because if again, let's say they win a couple playoff games, you're going to get to a point where Purdy is going to be the more experienced of the two quarterbacks because Trey Lance, quite frankly, hasn't had that experience of starting because of the injuries. And as we've talked about before, when you're a coach, when you're a good coach, when you're a good general manager / front office type evaluator, you don't know what you have at quarterback until you see it happen. So at the very least, there has to be a competition if Purdy continues to play as well as he has the last couple of weeks.
You know, it's wild, Jeff, that we're talking about a team that can lock up the NFC West tonight, and top of mind is who's going to be their quarterback in 2023. And another name I've seen floated out there is Tom Brady, and the 49ers among 4 or 5 teams that folks have speculated might go after Tom Brady. Do you think we see a Tom Brady sweepstakes again this offseason at the ripe old age of 92? Or do you think the 49ers are included in it if there is that sweepstakes?
I mean, I know one thing. He's the oldest man alive. So but I wouldn't rule out anything. Now, if Brady wants to come back and he calls up the 49ers, if he calls up Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch and says, hey, I want to come in for a workout, a visit, whatever. You owe it to yourself to at least answer the call and see what he has to say. Because you know right off the bat, the finances of it are going to be intriguing, but Brady's not going to be one who's going to say, I need $55 million a year to play for you. I mean, realistically, you're talking $25 million. And I know Brock Purdy is the bright, shiny new object right now, and he deserves to be because he's played really well for a couple games. But we don't know what it's realistically like, despite all of this fun talk that we've had the last couple of minutes already. Like, we don't know what it's going to look like. I mean, eventually these young guys tend to get exposed.
Right.
But I mean, if hiccups happen or whatever, I mean, if Tom Brady wants to join your organization and you don't answer the call, that's organizational malpractice.
Jeff Howe is with us here on Cattles and Ramie on this Thursday. Of course, Jeff is from The Athletic. How much do you think this Raiders-Patriots game coming up on Sunday means to the people involved, Jeff?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, just look back to 2009 when Josh McDaniels got his first crack at Bill Belichick and they won that game, and you see McDaniels fist pumping all the way down the sideline. I mean, obviously that was like the defining moment or the highest moment of his Broncos tenure. There weren't many, of course. But, I mean, that's going to mean a ton to him. You talk about a season where they've just had so many struggles and an inability to close out games. And if you had like 3 more breaks, and I know you get what you earn, and they haven't earned those breaks. But if they did, you know, you're talking about this Raiders team in a much different position. So you're talking about like moral victories. You're talking about ways to try to build toward 2023. And beating the Patriots is going to mean a lot for a lot of people in that building, whether it's McDaniels or Ziegler or the assistant coaches he brought with him. You know, a guy like Chandler Jones and some of the role players who have gone over there. You know, every little bit I think is going to add up for this team, regardless of the outcome of the season. Then if you're the Patriots, I mean, this is just like the Cardinals game a few nights ago. This is a must-win game. It's still an extreme long shot, I think, for them to make the playoffs. But in order to have a chance when you close out the season with the Bengals, Dolphins, and Bills, you absolutely have to be 8-6 in doing it. If they don't beat the Raiders, their season's over.
And they've had some tough ones, but was last week on Thursday night the worst loss for the Raiders?
I mean, it's got to be losing. I mean, the combination of losing to Jeff Saturday after that week and then losing to Baker Mayfield after he had been on the team for like 40 hours. Like, those are two. That's an argument you don't want to have, or a debate you don't want to have. Those are just two really, really difficult losses.
Jeff Howe is with us on the Folsom Lake Honda Hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Jeff, a very interesting game coming up on Saturday night. Miami, Buffalo. How big of a game is this for Miami to make that statement that, hey, we're neck and neck with you now?
It's massive, more so, I think, for Tua Tagovailoa and that offense to know that they can go throw for throw with some of the top offenses in the league. Because up until the last 2 weeks, there was no doubt that they could. Or you go back to week 3 when the Dolphins did beat the Bills, and it was like, oh my goodness, this 3-0 start, it's legit. Or when they were up to, I think it was 8-3, or just really putting a really good season together. I believe that this team was a true AFC contender. But with the way Tua has kind of thrown the ball all over the yard the last couple of weeks, when it comes down to, when you talk about this team's potential, or what I thought it was as of 2 weeks ago, you're talking about going through Buffalo and Kansas City, not necessarily Saturday night, but in the playoff, when you've got Mahomes, who isn't going to blink, and you've got Josh Allen, who's getting very close to that category, you have to be able to go throw for those guys. I mean, just look at what happened with Allen and Mahomes last year. You leave either one of those high-octane offenses even a second or two too much time, all of a sudden your season's over. And you have to make those throws consistently in order to give yourself a chance to reach that potential. So this is, if the Dolphins lose on Saturday like this, I don't think that this is going to be like a referendum, like their season's over or anything like that, as long as Tua goes and plays well. If they lose a shootout and the defense just doesn't hold up against Allen and the Bills, you know what? So be it. At least you improved upon the last 2 weeks, but that's going to be important.
I want to ask you a question, Jeff, that we're going to kick around a little bit right after we hang up with you. If I told you before this season started 16 weeks ago that week 15, Thursday night football, it's going to be Brock Purdy versus Geno Smith, what would you think the season looked like for these two teams and the NFC West as a whole?
16 weeks ago, I would have asked you who the hell Brock Purdy was. And now he's the hottest thing in the NFL. They're two incredible stories for two entirely different reasons. I mean, you think about the Russell Wilson trade and how hotly debated that was, even with people around the league. Some people thought the Broncos won the trade. Some thought the Seahawks won the trade. Some thought each side decisively won the trade. But what it's really, I think what we've seen is one side did decisively win that trade. But the other side of that was, we all thought it was going to be Drew Lock, but it was Geno Smith. And, he had that famous quote at the beginning of the season. And everything that he's done as a career revitalization has been absolutely remarkable. And it's hard to find something to compare it to, because this is somebody who, I think I recently had this number. He had only started 5 games, I think, in the previous 5 seasons combined. So it's not like he was sort of hanging around, was a fringe guy, had a Case Keenum type of season, 3 or 4 years ago. And then he had nothing to build on. And to have the Seahawks in playoff contention at this point is really remarkable. And plus, with the way that all those young guys have kind of stepped up, everybody talks about the youth and the Jets. The Seahawks are right there with the Jets with the amount of draft success they've recently had. And then obviously with the 49ers a lot more close to home to you guys. I mean, to be able to withstand the amount of injuries, particularly at quarterback, it's amazing that they're still in it. But even more so, it's amazing that because of the quarterback play they continue to get, first out of Jimmy Garoppolo and now in a short window out of Brock Purdy, to still consider them Super Bowl contenders is borderline mind-blowing.
Awesome stuff, Jeff. We'll catch up with you again next week, man. We appreciate you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good night, guys.
You too. There goes Jeff Howe from The Athletic on the Folsom Lake Honda Hotline.